Hi, welcome back to Fantasy Profits. It's Super Bowl Sunday night. The Super Bowl just finished. Before I go into the video, I want to take a moment to say congratulations to the New England Patriots for winning another championship. In honor of that championship, I won my only New England Patriots gear that I have, a Gronkowski jersey. Before we get into the video, a couple things quickly that we want you guys to keep an eye open for. At the Fantasy Profits, we're going to make some changes coming up. Hopefully better products for you guys, information, things like that, better videos. So keep an eye open for that and give us your feedback. We want to know what you guys want to see, what we can do differently, things like that. Let us know. Now, this is our early bust video for 2019. Players that are on our radar, guys we're going to look out for, guys you need to be concerned that could be a bust, and we'll explain that in a little bit. But let's just get right into the video with our first bust player for 2019. So my first bust player for 2019 is Pat Mahomes, the MVP of this season. Now, before you guys lose your head, before you get crazy and think this guy's insane, are you kidding me? Indulge me for a minute or two. Hear me out. Hear why I'm going to call him a potential bust for next year. First of all, I need to say this. I love this kid. I think he's got a ton of talent. He's got a great career ahead of him. I see many MVPs. I think he's going to hit the 50 touchdown barrier probably one more time at least, if not a couple times. But before we take a look at, why I consider that he could be a bust next season, there's a lot of things that determine if a guy's a bust, not just performance. What you paid for him, where you draft him, his average draft position, all those things determine a mattering value in whether the guy is a boom or a bust. An example, if I draft Odell Beckham in the first round and he goes out, he ends up getting me 850 yards, 65 catches, and 6 touchdowns for Odell Beckham in the first round. That is definitely a bust. But let's say I go out, I draft Robert Foster in the 10th round. So I go out and I take Robert Foster in the 10th round. He puts up those same numbers, 850 receiving yards, 65 catches, 6 touchdowns. That's a very serviceable number 3 wide receiver, and he's not a bust at all. So once again, where you get this guy matters a lot. Now, for Pat Mahomes, in many, many leagues this year, we know that he's going to be the #1 overall fantasy pick. Not just the #1 overall quarterback, he's going to be the #1 overall fantasy pick on a lot of teams. His inflated average draft position, or the cost he's going to cost you in a bid, hurts his value. Simply put, quarterbacks should never be drafted in the first round. We talk about that in a lot of our videos, of philosophy that we hold to, we believe wins you championships. Now, I want to give you some hard facts to consider when you look at this that are going to support why I feel this way and why I think there's going to be an overreaction that could ultimately turn out to be somewhat of a bust next year. First of all, the bar is set too high with this guy. Okay, it's just too high. This guy went out, he had a historical season his first year that he has started. Now, common sense is going to tell us that there's going to be an inevitable drop-off. You can't avoid it. There will be a drop-off statistically with him. Now, here's a few reasons I'm going to get into. Number one, defenses will make adjustments. It is the NFL. We saw it earlier this year. You looked at the Kansas City Rams game, right? Final score, I think, was like 54-51. That's it. Defense don't matter anymore. It's all about scoring points. Well, then we watch the Super Bowl tonight, and you know what? Defense matters. Defenses will make adjustments. But I think another thing we need to consider, every quarterback that's went on and had a season like he has had, a huge season, 50 touchdown passes, has followed it up with a significant drop the following year. I want to take a look at some of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of the NFL and some of the seasons that they've had. Let's look at their numbers briefly. We can break this down. So take a look at Peyton Manning there, right? He goes out, he throws for 55 TDs. The very next season, 39, that's a 29% drop. He followed that up. If you look at the year he broke that record, he had 3.44 touchdown passes per game. The next year down to 2.44. So you can see across the board, same thing. Tom Brady went out through 50, next year 28, 44% drop. Pat Mahomes, we'll see what he'll do. Let's go down to Peyton Manning again, 49, drop down to 28. And you can see down that list, if you look at every player on there, after having that huge year, they had a significant drop. The only quarterback that was really consistent was Drew Brees, but even he saw a drop percentage-wise. So what we have in there is we have their touchdowns, the following year's touchdowns, what percentage of drop that was, and then the category after that is your touchdowns per game, and then the category after that is how many touchdowns per game they had the following year. And so you kind of get where I'm tracking with that. Every single one of those guys after a huge year has seen a drop-off. Why should he be any different? It's hard to maintain that high of a ceiling. When you go out and have the year that he had, it's very hard. There are many factors that play into it. And one of it, there's just a statistical limit that guys can achieve. Teams will adjust. It's inevitable. Case in point, Dan Marino. Let's take a look at his career. Great quarterback who at the same age of Pat Mahomes this year, age of 22, came into the league and he started crushing records. He had 2 Super Bowl appearances in 83 and 85, his rookie season and his 3rd season as a pro at ages 22 and 24. He won the MVP, same as Pat, and he threw for 48 touchdown passes his 2nd year in the league, very similar to Pat. Then he broke 44 again at age 25 in his 4th season. So this guy is crushing it, right? Through his first 4 seasons, he led quarterbacks in touchdown passes 3 times, but never again had he did that after that. In fact, he went on to play till the age of 38, 13 more seasons. If you take a look at his numbers, there's a major drop there. In fact, after that, his remaining 13 seasons, he only hit the 30 touchdown pass plateau once. So teams adjusted, it's going to happen. Teams will make adjustments. Now, I know the league is not what it was back when Dan Marino was playing. I know the league has opened up more. I know offenses are more prolific. So I don't think the drop-off for him is going to be as significant that it was for Dan Marino. But I think here's the thing. A lot of people assume Pat Mahomes went out. He threw 50 touchdown passes in his first season that he has started. So obviously, coming up in 2019, he's going to throw for 55 or maybe even 60. That's the mindset of owners. We think that's going to happen there. We even saw a slight adjustment this year in his numbers. If you take a look at the first 4 games, it actually took 5 games before he threw an interception. Through the first 4 games, he had 14 touchdown passes to 0 interceptions. Now after that, he was still good. The last 12 games, he was still very good. But the last 12 games, he had 36 touchdown passes to 12 interceptions. Once again, in the last 12 games, we saw a little bit of adjustment there. We saw that he kind of came down to earth a little bit. So you already see that adjustment. Teams will adjust. Example 2 I want to give. Deshaun Watson. In his rookie season, he had a stretch for the ages. Okay? This guy was phenomenal. So he had 4 starts before he tore his ACL, right? In those last 4 starts before hurting his ACL, his quarterback ratings were 125, 120, 103, and 107 respectively. During that same 4-game stretch, he had 16 touchdowns with 1 rushing touchdown. That pace would give him 64 touchdown passes for the year. Even if you just look at the 7 games that he started, he was still on a remarkable pace of 43 touchdown passes. So going into this year's average draft position in a lot of leagues, he was the number 2 overall quarterback taken, only behind Aaron Rodgers. In a lot of leagues, in many leagues, he was the number 1 quarterback taken. That actually happened. There was a huge overreaction to him. We actually had Watson in our tier 2 quarterback ratings, not tier 1 like a lot of leagues had him. We had him in tier 2, and he had him ranked as the number 7th overall quarterback. That's where we had him at. And now, as far as Watson goes, I think we were right on. He ended up with 26 touchdown passes. Okay, so if you look at that, that was 1.62 touchdown passes per game this year, whereas previous season, that 7-game stretch was 2.71. Once again, a major thing that happened there. He took a step back. Certainly was still very good. I think he's going to be a great quarterback, but people got so caught up in the hype. In fact, we predict him to be number 7th. It's number 7th. I guess I can get that right there. Number 7th quarterback in our rankings, and he actually finished number 7th in average quarterback points per game. Here are some of the preseason notes that we had regarding him. We went on to say this from our website. Expect a good year from him, distinguished career from him, but don't let the hype cause you to overvalue him. He will not make it in the top 5 quarterback scoring by year's end. I expect a slight step back as defenses will now have game film and time to prepare and adjust to him. We went on to say this in our preseason rankings. Another reason why I expect a drop-off in production for Watson from last year is he was helped out by a bad Houston defense that forced the Texans to throw a lot and play from behind a lot of garbage time stats. Houston's defense was the worst in the NFL, 32nd in the league, allowing 27.3 points per game, and that was against Jags, Colts, Titans for a total of 6 games, and those offenses were not good. That defense was brutally bad if you look at that. And what we said in the preseason, that defense, Houston defense, can't get any worse. They're going to make improvements. And that improved defense means he's not going to have to throw as much. We went on to say they added a number of players in the offseason. We listed all the players. We talked about healthy J.J. Watt, merciless Clowney on the line. That defense will improve, and therefore that offense won't need to throw as much. The reason why I bring that up as an example, we predicted that with Watson, is we want to run that point to Pat Mahomes quickly. And why we feel like Pat Mahomes will have a statistical step back next season. Kansas City's defense was also very bad this year. If you take a look at it, Kansas City's defense was 24th in the NFL in points allowed, and they fired their defensive coordinator. But if you actually look at it, they were worse than 24th in terms of points allowed. They were a bad defense. The Chiefs allowed 28 touchdowns on the road, second most in the NFL behind 33 given up to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They allowed 405 yards per game. That was second worst in the NFL, only behind Cincinnati at 413. They gave up 419 first downs this season, outdistancing the second worst team by quite a distance. They had 419 first downs that they allowed, and the Cleveland Browns 377. The Chiefs know that in order for them to go out next year and take it to the next level, maybe compete for a Super Bowl, make it to the Super Bowl, they need to improve that defense. That inevitable defensive improvements is going to reduce the need for Pat Mahomes to throw a lot and score. You're not going to get as many shootouts there. That's going to happen. Often, quarterback production is tied to how bad a defense is. And I'll give you another example of that, Matt Ryan. You can see his numbers fluctuate in fantasy and even how he did on the field in terms of how bad that defense won. The Falcons in 2018 were the 25th defense in rankings. They allowed 26.4 points per game. That season, Matt Ryan finished second in fantasy scoring. Go back to 2017, though, the defense improved that year over the previous year. They were 8th in defensive scoring, allowing 19.7 points per game. Ryan finished 16th in fantasy scoring in quarterbacks. Then finally, go back to 2016, right? The Falcons finished 27th in defense, allowing 25.4 points per game. That season, Matt Ryan was 3rd in fantasy scoring. Once again, as his defense played worse, he was forced to throw more. His fantasy numbers went up. When the defense improved, his fantasy numbers went down. It's just inevitable. The Kansas City defense has to make improvements. They will make improvements. He won't have to throw as much. Here's some other numbers to consider. 565. That's how many points the Chiefs scored this year. That was 38 more points than the next team in the NFL. And it's 3rd most points scored in a single season, only behind the 2013 Denver Broncos and the 2007 New England Patriots. They were a phenomenal offense this year, scoring a ton of points. But if you take a look at those numbers, you look historically, every time an offense breaks a scoring record like that, most points scored per season, whether it's the Vikings with Moss and Carter, or when the greatest show on turf did it with Kurt Warner out in England, Denver, etc. The next season, all those offenses had a drop in points scored or production. It's inevitable. It's safe to assume Kansas City's offense is not going to score as many points next season. Things will level off, defenses will make adjustments, the offenses will slow down, and so will the Chiefs, and that's going to hurt his numbers next year. We predicted regressions. If you followed the site for a few years, we predicted regression from Cam Newton after his MVP season and Matt Ryan after his MVP season. We strongly warned people not to get too hyped up on it. A lot of people disagreed. They thought we were wrong, and we nailed it. We predicted a regression with Deshaun Watson. Here's another reason why I think that Pat Mahomes could be a bust next year. He's going to be drafted #1 overall in many, many leagues, and we advise never take a quarterback early. We just think it's bad fantasy advice. We usually advise to wait until maybe after the 6th or 7th round to take your quarterback. Even if he puts up 50 touchdown passes again next season, I would not advise him taking him in the 1st round. Trust me on this one. So here's what a lot of fantasy owners do. This is one of the biggest mistakes that they make. They take the quarterback too early. Whether they draft him too early or they overbid for him. What happens? Our emotions kick in. We like big names like Rodgers, Brady, Breeze, and of course next season that big name will be Pat Mahomes. And I love all those quarterbacks, by the way. But in our excitement, we overreach for the guy, and we make the tragic mistake of overpaying for him. And I've lived by this philosophy. Just so you know, we talked about it before. I put my money where my mouth is. Back in 2013, I had Peyton Manning go ahead and break the record, 55 touchdown passes. It's a dynasty league. So next year we're keeping our 5 or 6 guys for next season. I didn't keep them. I dropped them. I kept some running backs and wide receivers to keep some depth there. The next year I actually went out and won the league. Once again, I believe strongly I will never pay too much. I will never take a quarterback too early. How many owners got crushed in 2016 after they took Cam Newton 1 overall, and then after that huge MVP season, he flopped? So once again, what makes a guy a bust is not necessarily his performance, but where you got him. What'd you pay for him? Where'd you take him in the draft? Things like that. Here's why you can wait on a quarterback. The league has become increasingly passer-friendly. More and more teams run spread formations, shotgun formations. Tight ends now are expected to catch the ball, not just block. All this means more scoring. Quarterbacks are putting in more and more numbers, more touchdown passes, more passing yards. And according to law of supply and demand, this drives down the value for quarterbacks since more and more quarterbacks are productive in terms of fantasy football. We have a little graph there if you take a look at it on the screen. You can see that going all the way back to 1970 when they looked at how many quarterbacks threw for 4,000 yards, how many quarterbacks threw for 30 touchdown passes. Each year that number has shot up significantly, and we'll continue to see that. I mean, there's just more and more quarterbacks that you can get value with out there. Yeah, it's great to have Pat Mahomes, but you know what? I can settle for another guy that's going to end up with 30 passes while I load my team with other important talent. Just to look at that comparison based on what we talked about before. Used to be throwing for 30 touchdown passes in the NFL was rare. If you threw for 30 touchdown passes, you were in the MVP conversation. Example, in 1994, only 3 quarterbacks did that. Marino, Favre, and Steve Young. But now reaching that plateau is more common. In fact, in 2015, 11 quarterbacks threw for 30 touchdown passes. 2 more ended with 29. An additional 3 were on pace to have 30, except they got injured. Once again, there's just more and more quarterbacks putting up good numbers there. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't draft a guy like Pat Mahomes in the 3rd round if he happened to be there, but he won't be, okay? In the 1st round, that's where you get your quality players. That's where you're going to draft those top running backs, top-tier wide receivers. And a guy like Pat Mahomes won't be there in the 3rd round because another owner is going to take him. He's going to get overexcited and pay for it. And so, once again, that's why we encourage you to take your quarterbacks later on. Now, some would argue this. I want to share a point with you. Pat Mahomes was on championship rosters 35% of the time this year. So some would say, like, see, look at a guy like that validates that. It shows if you get a good quarterback like that, he can carry you to the championship. But I think that people are misunderstanding what that actually tells us. I think it actually proves our theory. Because here's the thing. Yeah, he was on a lot of championship teams, but that's because he was drafted on average 118th overall. In 12-team leagues, that's 9th or 10th round. I think the reason why those teams did so well is not because he had a good year, which that was huge, but because they were able to pick up other positions early in the draft and build that up. And then get a guy like him later on that was so productive, that just increases your value for that pick. Another example that we would say is give some other recent examples of quarterbacks that you could get great value on that their average draft position was terrible. This year, Ben Roethlisberger, we were huge on that guy. We said draft him, he's going to be big. His average draft position fluctuated a lot between 12 to 14. Even at one point started dropping down to around 16. He gained some value back closer to the start of the season. He finished 4th in quarterback scoring. Fitzpatrick and Winston, 10th and 11th in average points per game. Same thing with Dak Prescott, 10th overall in points. In 2017, Wentz, Alex Smith, Cousins, Stafford were all taken out of the top 10. Often they were taken outside the top 15 in terms of quarterback ratings, and they all end up in the top 10 in scoring. 2016, same for Matt Ryan, Bortles, Dak Prescott. I go on and on. There's so many examples of guys that you can get later on that will bring huge value to the team. So, I love Pat Mahomes. I think he's great. But I just don't think it's not going to, you can't justify taking him as a first overall pick, and that's what a lot of guys are going to do. And for that reason, for a lot of you guys, he's going to be a bust. You take him number 1 overall, you're going to pass up some great running backs out there. Some studs are going to be huge for you, and it's going to hurt you when you could have got another quarterback that could have been almost as good, especially since you're going to see a slight statistical regression with Pat Mahomes. So it's a lot of information. Hopefully I didn't talk to you faster. Hopefully I processed all that. I want to hear your thoughts on that, but I want to hear your feelings of Pat Mahomes. I love the guy. I want to hear what your thoughts are about the numbers. Let's get to the next guy. Another situation that could be a bust is the running back situation for the San Francisco 49ers. I think a lot of owners are going to be excited about this offense and the potential that San Francisco has there. They have a young, improving offense. Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be back. George Kittle is becoming or has become a great tight end. And Shanahan has worked magic in the NFL with his offenses before. All this seems to point to a nice draw from that offense. I think there's a lot of numbers to be had in that offense there to the wise owner, right? So I think a lot of people will look towards that and think, okay, if I land on one of those backs, I got good production. Now, as I begin to break this down, this is with an assumption right now because obviously free agency hasn't started yet. This is with the assumption that the 49ers don't bring in a guy like a Le'Veon Bell. I don't think they're going to. It's assuming that they're going to be looking at Matt Breida, Jerick McKinnon, and Jeff Wilson. So we're going to do it based on those guys there. Now, I think the 49ers backs are going to have some nice games this year and production. I think this offense is going to be very solid next season. But this situation is setting owners up for failure. I think you're looking at fool's gold in this one, and here's why. If you look at Shanahan, he loves backs, let's say Devontae Freeman, who back in his day had a huge year. I think it was 2015 for Atlanta. He had a great season there. And so he likes backs like that can be used in the passing game, can get out in space, things like that. Breida's like that, and that's why they brought in Jerick McKinnon with his big contract to play that role and to be a good fit in his offense there. All those backs are quick. They have good hands in the passing game. They're very talented. But they're smaller backs and have durability issues with their smaller size. They did a study using analytics, and they broke it down a little bit. And what they found out, what's the ideal weight and size for an NFL running back, where you can be still fast, quick, but be physical enough to handle the wear and tear in the NFL. And what they found, the ideal size in the NFL is a running back between 215 to 225 pounds, around 5'11". That's what they felt was the ideal size, where they could be fast, quick, and still be durable. According to a 2006 ESPN article, the average weight in the NFL has grown by, the average weight in the NFL has grown by 10% since 1985. Players are just simply getting bigger, and I think we'll continue to see that trend to some degree. So here are the sizes, going back in the fact the ideal running back should be 215 to 225. So San Francisco, Matt Breida is 190 pounds, Jerick McKinnon 205, and Jeff Wilson 194. They're all smaller backs. Now, if you look back to 2017, people get so caught up in the moment, right? But you got to look at the bigger picture. Ultimately, these smaller backs have a hard time being productive. They're not going to become your bell cow. They're not going to get 20, 25 carries a game. They simply can't do it. Back in 2017, after 3 games, people are so excited about Tariq Cohen, and they begin to come out and say that Jordan Howard's going to be relegated to a time split and timeshare. They're like, you know what, these guys are going to be a timeshare. It's not going to happen. We said that's not going to be the case. We came on our video and said, don't listen to the hype. Jordan Howard's going to be the guy that's going to get a majority of the carries there. Tariq Cohen is too small to handle that wear and tear. That season, sure enough, Howard finished with 17.5 carries per game, and the smaller Cohen only 5.4 carries per game. With his size, he's just not going to get 15 to 20 carries per game. He's a small guy. In fact, if you look between the two backs, Howard and Tariq Cohen, there's a 44-pound difference between the two. And we said that's going to matter in the long term in the season. Size matters in the NFL. So if you go back to Devontae Freeman when he came in the league, if you looked at our rankings and what we said about him, one of the things that we said on our site was we loved his skill set, but we have concerns about durability because of his size. He's only 206, so he's another back that's on the smaller size. Now we're beginning to see those durability issues come out. In 2017, he missed 2 games, injuries, but he was banged up for a lot of games. He had concussion, shoulder, leg injury. Last season, he missed 14 games. The injuries are beginning to pile up, and I think it's because he's a smaller back there. If you look at Breida, he's even smaller. Breida is 25 pounds below the ideal size for an NFL back, either 25 to 35 pounds, depending on what you look at there. You look at last year, during the NFL season, every week Matt Breida was questionable. He missed practice. He was constantly game time decision there. He gutted out. He played hard. I love that, but he's really hard to trust from week to week. He left many games early, and here's the other thing, because he was often questionable, that label reduced how many touches he got, and he reduced his workload during the games. I think San Francisco backs are going to have some nice stats, but here's the real question going into next year. Who's going to be the guy? Who are you going to read? Is it Matt Breida? Is Jerick McKinnon coming back from surgery? Maybe it's McKinnon. They put him good money to bring him in here. He had 2 seasons for the Vikings where he had a combined 94 catches. And he's a great fit for Shanahan's offense. He was brought in for that role. So is it Jerick McKinnon next year? Well, if you look at those 2 years for the Vikings where he had those 94 catches, that was great, but his yards per carry during that stretch of 3.59, not great production as a runner. He's great on passing downs. He's a great change of pace back, but he's not a great pure runner. If you look at Jerick McKinney, he has deficiencies in his game. So maybe it's Matt Breida. Maybe he's the guy you can trust at next year, right? But if you remember Breida last season, he was actually killing in the preseason. Matt Breida looked better than Jerick McKinnon before McKinnon had went down. So maybe he's the better back, and by the way, I do think that he is. Maybe he gets the nod. But you need to consider this with Matt Breida also, even though he's looked like he's more explosive and more talented back. Smaller size backs create inconsistency. And here's why that's the case. Smaller backs can't pound the ball. They can't churn out yards like a 235-pound bruiser that's going to face loaded boxes. And often because they can't do that, teams will begin to kind of abandon the run a little bit there. If you look at Matt, he's been great at times, but he's also struggled at times. In 4 games last year, Matt Breida had over 100 yards, 3 different occasions. In those 4 games, his totals were 52 carries, 435 yards, and a 8.06 yards per carry. That's great. But all of his other games, he had 101 carries for 379 yards for a 3.75 yards per carry. Those are the same type of numbers and trends we actually see from Jerick McKinney if you look at his career there. It looks like Matt Breida is the more gifted back. But for me, the real issue with these backs in that offense and why it's going to be an issue, why it's going to be hard for owners to trust this, and why if you go with one of those backs, it could be a bust. It comes down to durability, keeping these backs healthy and on the field. You know what's even worse than injuries to these guys? You know the worst case scenario could happen next year, and this is what I could see potentially happening? Nobody gets injured. And I think what's going to happen is they don't want their running backs to get injured, so they're going to spread the wealth, and you're going to have a dreaded running back buy committee. And so you don't want that. Nobody wants that at all. So because of size and durability, here's what I see Shanahan doing next season. Spreading the wealth in terms of carries and touches, splitting time. So even if they're productive, their overall numbers aren't going to be good. And so once again, these are guys that have potential. But right now, when I look at those backs, I simply don't trust them. I think they could be a bust. The number 1 guy that I like at this point of those backs is Matt Breida. To me, he's a running back 3 in PPR leagues, a running back 4 in standards. I think he'd be good at times in the right matchups, but he's not going to be a stud. I think people would be mistaken to trust that. Another guy out there that I think could be a bust is Cam Newton. Now, the argument for him being a bust is very similar to Pat Mahomes' argument, which is we never invest in a quarterback too early. We've always said that a lot. We should take our quarterback around round 6 or 7 beyond that point. We want to build our team strength in the running backs, wide receivers, and if you have to start at tight end, that's where we encourage you to do it. We always know there'll be value in the quarterback position later on in the draft. But what's going to happen, I think, with Cam Newton is a lot of owners, I think back to his MVP season 2015, see potential, get excited, and reach for this guy. Don't make that mistake. Even if he rebounds and he's healed next year, there's a lot of reasons why you should be discouraged or concerned about Cam Newton. One thing I would say is he's having surgery. Just had surgery, actually. Now, consider it's not serious. He had a surgery to repair a partially torn rotator cuff there. Now, it was arthroscopic surgery, so it seems like it's going to be fine. So far, it seems like it's good news. Everything points to him being back and ready for the season. But once again, you never know. Isn't that the same rhetoric we heard from Andrew Luck? who had shoulder surgery. The team told us time and time again, Andrew Luck's going to be fine for the season. He'll be fine. He wasn't. He missed the entire season. Same thing could happen with Cam Newton there. In fact, it's concerning because this is the second surgery now he's had in 2 years. You guys start wondering what's going on there with that shoulder injury. I think another reason why there's some red flags and why you should be concerned is the overinflated value that people have him as a quarterback. I'll say this, he's a great athlete, but he's not a great quarterback. Take a look at his MVP season 2015. A lot of people got burned the following year there, right? And we told people in our thing, buyer beware. We cautioned, like, okay, and we broke down a little bit. One thing that we said, and we'd even say it now a couple years later, it's only twice in his career he's had a quarterback rating of over 88 and never a quarterback rating over 100. He's a tremendous athlete, but as a pocket passer, he's just above average. He's not great there. Now he's going to be entering his ninth season in the NFL. So he's going to be going into his 9th year. This guy's big and physical, undoubtedly. This guy's huge. It's like a linebacker playing quarterback. That's allowed to play bigger than most quarterbacks, but regardless of his size, even though he can play bigger than most quarterbacks, his body has taken a beating, and those hits add up in the NFL. Now, I'm sure that if you're the Panthers, what you want to do with your star player there, you'd love to see him decrease the hits and begin to protect that shoulder and run less. That'd be ideal, right? Run less, protect that body, take it easy, throw him more. That'll keep him healthy. But here's the problem with that, if he runs less. It's his running that's made him a good quarterback and a good fantasy option. If you look at his numbers, he's only averaging 22.75 passing touchdowns per season. That's it. That's not that great. What's carried him, what's made him a great fantasy quarterback is his rushing touchdowns. In 8 seasons, he's got 58. Okay, that's 7.25 per season. Now, if you take that per season, you take his passing touchdowns and you run that equates out to turn to be 33 passing touchdowns per season when you convert those. Those are very good numbers, right? But I think we're already seeing a decline in his rushing touchdowns. So if they start running him less to protect him, those rushing numbers go down, those rushing touchdowns go down, and his overall numbers aren't as good. In his first 5 seasons, he had 8.6 rushing touchdowns per season. In his last 3 years, he's only averaging 5 per season. So we're already seeing that decrease. If you look at it also, in the 2 of the last 3 seasons, he has lowest rushing totals. So what he's going to need to do to offset that is throw better and throw more and be a more effective pocket passer to maintain his fantasy value. And yet, now he's coming off a major shoulder surgery, so that's a concern there. Another concern I have for him going into this year, he's got a lot of young, talented weapons on that team there, but they're all young. McCaffrey's about the only great guy that I'd say has proven himself that you can trust. Sam has shown potential, Moore looks legit, but they're all young, and there's a lot of question marks there. His most trustworthy vet is Greg Olsen, who can't stay healthy. He's had foot injuries. He's not young anymore. So when I look at Cam Newton, he's a guy I think he'd bust next year. People could take him too early. If I was you, I would avoid that. Look elsewhere. Another guy you need to watch out for next year is Phillip Lindsay. I actually like Phillip Lindsay too. I think he's a great story. He had a great year. I got huge love for this guy. And he had a great season. But what's going to happen is going into next year, because of his year, because of his potential, how he did, in a lot of leagues, he'll be a 2nd-round pick. And in some deeper leagues, over 12 teams or deeper, he'll end up creeping in the 1st round in some drafts. Mark my words, it will happen. And so I think his average draft position makes him a bust next year. Now, this Pro Bowl running back, the undrafted rookie, was great. What a great story he had. First concern for them, why you need to be concerned that he may not be as productive next year. One, he's going to miss 4 to 6 months with post-wrist surgery. So he's got that whole wrist surgery. It's going to affect his rehab in the offseason, workouts, things like that. He's got a new coaching change on the horizon. There's a lot of influx on that team, stuff going on that's concerning. Now, if you look at him last year, Lindsay was stunning. He benefited greatly, though, if you took a look at his numbers. If you broke it down a little bit, his numbers were great, his yards per carry were great, but he faced a lot of light boxes. He only faced stacked boxes 14% of the time. A lot of the top backs in the NFL can face stacked boxes close to 50% of the time. Now, there's a lot of other factors that come into play there, but that's certainly the case. So what happened with him, if you look at Denver, they were playing from behind a lot, and defenses were in spread formation, and that contributed great yards per carry in the space that he exploited because of his talent. He's not going to see as many. Defenses next year will take notice. They're not going to leave him open. He's going to see a lot more stacked boxes next year. Case in point, Todd Gurley. His rookie season, yards per carry, 4.9. The next season, as a sophomore, defense is focused on shut down the run. His yards per carry dropped down to 3.2. Now, if you look at Lindsay, he was explosive. He looked great. I think he's going to have a nice second year. I do. I think that. But he's just not worthy of the 1st or 2nd round value. And here's why. I'm going to go back to the same reasoning that I had also for the San Francisco situation, which is that smaller back struggle and that smaller backs struggle to stay healthy and doesn't translate well long term. And smaller backs have a limited ceiling in fantasy terms. Smaller backs simply don't sustain production. And he's another back, he's only 190 pounds, he's smaller. There's a reason why he was undrafted in the NFL. A lot of teams were concerned about his size. Even coming out of college, even coming out of high school trying to find a college, he had a hard time because of his side there. Now, a lot of people would point out there's other undrafted running backs that have had great success. Priest Holmes, Arian Foster, Fred Jackson, Joe Perry, these guys were undrafted. They came to the NFL, they had great careers. But they're all much different. Phillip Lindsay, they were all much bigger than him. The closest size comparison of the guys that I mentioned was Perry. So he had a very good career as a running back in the NFL. But he was 200 pounds, so that's still 10 more pounds than Phillip Lindsay. But here's the thing, Perry played from 48 to 63, so from 1948 to 1963, the league was different. Like we quoted earlier, people have gotten bigger and bigger, so being a 200 pound back then, today is the equivalent to being a 220 and 225 pound back, so big difference there. The other undrafted backs that we mentioned before, well, I think are much better comparisons. Look at Priest Holmes. Priest Holmes weighed 215, that's 25 pounds more than Lindsay. Foster was 6'1", 227, that's 37 more pounds heavier. And Jackson was 215, another 25 pounds heavier. So those guys that were undrafted were all bigger, more physical backs. Another concern, I think, is Royce Freeman. Now, Royce Freeman is 230 pounds. Now, his yards per carry this year weren't great at 4.0, but the Broncos are not going to give up on him. This is a guy that at times showed promise. He looked great in the preseason, and he's built more like your typical back in the NFL. And he's a guy that if he makes some adjustment and works hard in the offseason, he could be a sleeper, and he could steal some of that role from Phillip Lindsay. Other backs in the NFL that are close to Phillip Lindsay's skill set that have had success, Jamal Charles and Brian Westbrook. But if you look at them, first of all, they're both bigger than Lindsay. And really, Westbrook's success was limited to 2,000-yard rushing seasons. Most of his success was as a pass-catching back. Even if Lindsay is productive, that team is going to want to protect their star player. They're going to limit his touches, lower his ceiling. Here's why I see Lindsay next year. I think he's going to develop a bigger presence in the passing game and higher value in PPR leagues, but I don't think he's going to become your bell cow. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if his total yards for the year rushing is about the same as they were this season. Don't expect that to blow up. He's not going to go to 1,600 yards next year, even though he had a very good season. Another guy out there could be a bust is Leonard Fournette. This guy is scary for me. He's what I call high risk, high reward. He looks like the guy who has the makings of a great stud back in the NFL. But he's already fallen out of favor with the team. There's been talk of trade, so there's been a lot that's changed in the 2 short years he's been there. The team took away his guarantees from his rookie deal after a fight against the Buffalo Bills that led to a 1-game suspension. The front office, there have been rumors of trades. In fact, there's even talk about him being traded to Philadelphia of all things there. And so just a lot of ugliness going on in terms as far as where the team views him and where he is at. In our preseason ranking videos last year, we actually broke him down, and we did highlight that he had low yards per carry as a rookie, and that was a concern for us. We also mentioned inconsistency as a rookie. Now, his first season, he was decent. He had a 3.9 yards per carry, and that could have gone either way, but it got worse in his second year. It dropped down to 3.3. Another concern for this guy, he's had a history of health issues. Even going back to college, he can't stay healthy. If you look at it, he had ankle injuries all the way through his final season at LSU. He aggravated 3 different times. He missed 6 games. He built later on in the year that he had a high ankle sprain and a bone bruise. In 2017, as a rookie, he lost games to right ankle sprain, quad bruise, plus a 1-game team imposed suspension. So that's the second suspension he's had in 2 years, one by the team, one by the league. He also sat out the final 3 preseason games after he had his foot stepped on. Last year, that he just finished, he missed 7 games. So there's just a lot of concerns there with suspensions, injuries, things like that. Even if he stays healthy and personally turns things around, there's a lot of things that he needs to overcome, a lot of hurdles, and I'll tell you what they are. He's hindered by that team's offense. That team's offense has got to get some things fixed. In 2017, he faced more loaded boxes than any other running back in the NFL. If they don't get a capable quarterback in there, that's going to continue. That's not going to change when teams face him. Now, the team brought in their new offensive coordinator, John DeFilippo. So I'm a Vikings fan, obviously, and he was our offensive coordinator to start this year. They let him go after only a partial season. One of the biggest concerns that the Vikings had and Coach Zimmer had and voiced publicly was an ability by John DeFilippo there to get the running game going. So now we're going to assume that he's going to go there to Jacksonville and be able to jumpstart Leonard Fournette. That may be a concern. Phillip, when he was an offensive coordinator also of the Cleveland Browns, their starting back then was Isaiah Crowell. who had the worst season as a back. That was the only season since he's been in the NFL where his yards per carry was below 4. So once again, this guy, John DeFilippo, their offensive coordinator, has not had a history of getting running games going. That doesn't bode well for Leonard Fournette. So there's a lot of red flags there. There is talk of trading Nick Foles to Jacksonville, and then Fournette would go to Philadelphia. If that happens, I think that'd be a huge boost to his value. But as it sits right now, there are a ton of red flags for Leonard Fournette. He'll be boom or bust. He might be a value play for him, but you better not take him too early and pay too much for this guy, or you might be regretting it. Another guy is Doug Henry. So I think what we tend to do as fantasy owners is we forget, we have a short memory, and we miss the big picture. So what most owners are going to do is this. They're going to look at his numbers that he had between weeks 14 through 17. They're going to project that out, those 4 games, say, man, this guy over 16 games is going to just crush it. And he'll be a top 10 back next season. He's not going to be a top 10 back next season for a lot of reasons. First of all, here's why I'd be concerned, why I think he could be a bust. He has almost non-existent PPR value. In 3 years, he's got a total of 39 catches, has 13 catches per season. This year, he didn't even break 100 receiving yards. And that team, that offense, they need him to be productive. They need a back that can also be out there and be a threat in the passing game. So what that tells us for Derrick Henry is even if he is a big, great bruiser, his total snaps are going to be limited until he can figure out how to be a more productive pass catcher and more productive in pass protection, things like that. Now, he did end up with good numbers this year. 215 carries, 1,059 yards, 4.9 yards per carry for 12 touchdowns. But most of those stats were due for weeks 14 and 15, 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks, he had 50 carries, 408 yards, and 8.16 yards per carry. Minus those 2 weeks, you take them out of there, the rest of the year, okay, the other 14 games, he had 165 carries, 651 rushing yards at a 3.95 yards per carry. That is not good. In week 14 that he had that huge game was against a Jags defense that really just gave up at that point. The season was falling apart. The wheels were coming off, and they were terrible. The attacking was terrible. I want to take you back to a guy named Jerome Harrison. You remember who this guy is. He played for the Browns in 2009. He had a 3-game stretch at the end of the season. In those 3 games, Jerome Harrison exploded for 561 rushing yards. He had 1 game with 286. Even though that entire year, he only ended up with 862 rushing yards. Those numbers did not carry over to the next season. In fact, he had a last carry in the NFL in 2012, and then he was done. Now, I'm not saying that Derrick Henry is going to follow that trajectory. I'm not saying Derrick Henry is not going to have a decent year, but don't overhype this guy. Now, if you look at what he did, what changed for him? If you talked about it, you followed it, what he said was a conversation that he had with Eddie George changed the end of his second half of the year, why he got better. Okay, that's great. Maybe there's an adjustment. Maybe Eddie George gave him some insight to his game that helped improve him as a player. But you know what the biggest advice Eddie George gave him was? You need to run hard. And I thought, wouldn't you think as an NFL running back, somebody who's been in college football, you'd understand that? I'm not sure long-term that's going to equate to numbers, just simply telling the guy to run hard. He should already be doing that, so I'm concerned. I think he's going to have value in standard leagues, but I think a lot of people are going to overvalue him and overhype him based on how he finished in over those 2 games, and they're going to pay too much for him, and he'll be a bust. Final guy, Zach Ertz, I want to talk about. So in his 5th consecutive season, his numbers have continued to improve. Each year, stats have gone up. This guy's been really good. But he had a big jump this year that's concerning for me, and I'll tell you why. Between 2015 and 2017, he averaged 76 catches and 831 yards per season. This season, he gets 116 catches, 1,163 yards. So the guy just explodes. Well, why do I see regression or he could possibly be a bust? Okay? With those numbers, he's going to be drafted by a lot of owners as an elite tight end. In many leagues that require starting a tight end, he'll get drafted in the first round. If you're in a league that's got 12 teams or more, if you're in a 16-team league, I've been in a few of those, he'll make it into the first round, guarantee that. But he's not going to repeat those numbers. Even in an ideal situation, it'd be very hard for a tight end to repeat those numbers. I'm going to point to a reason why I think there'll be a drop-off. One, Coach Peterson said the team must improve the running game. They're going to make a concerted effort to improve the running game. And that concerted effort to improve the running game means less stats for other players like Ertz. In fact, they're even training for Leonard Fournette, like I had mentioned. But to me, the biggest reason why I think that he could see a drop-off, when I look at Zach Ertz, here's what I'm saying for next season. I'm just going to go off there and say 85 catches, 850 yards, and 68 touchdowns. The biggest reason why I think his numbers are going to drop is Dallas Goedert. If you look at that, their backup tight end there, he is very good. And if Zach Ertz wasn't there this year, Dallas would have had a big year there. Heading into the draft, 2018 draft, here's how they assessed him. Now, his numbers don't look great because he's a backup, but at times he flashed on the field. Here's what they said about him heading the draft, Dallas Goedert. He's projected to go in the first or second round. He ultimately went in the second round there. They made NFL comparisons to him. A lot of experts looked and said, let's look at him. Let's look who's currently in the NFL and who's he look closest like. You know who they compared him most likely to? Zach Ertz. Here's his breakdown. A lot of experts said this is how we describe his talent there. He's very talented pass catching tight end with the ability to work all three levels of the field. His ball focus, ability to make spectacular catch will make him the darling of fans immediately throughout the draft process. He has some work to do. He's dominated lower level competition, will prove he can uncover and block against bigger, more explosive athletes as a pro. A little knock there, right? Goes on to say, though, his size, speed, and talent are enough for him to be very successful in the NFL. So when I take a look at that, I think Zach Ertz is going to have a step back in his numbers. Not that he's going to not be a good tight end, but he's certainly not going to be a first-round tight end. I think his numbers drop back a little bit there. I think Dallas Goedert steals some stats. I think they focus on the running game, and I think people are going to overpay for Zach Ertz, and they're going to regret it next year. So it's really early. Those are some guys I think could bust next year for various reasons. I want to hear your take on the information. Once again, make a comment, share, like. We really appreciate it. God bless and take care.